David with no chaser, or rather, sunburnt David with no chaser. I am very sunburnt, and you would think of all the years in my lives and travels I've had that I would learn to use sunscreen, but I don't, which, by the way, is a good comparison to an addict or an alcoholic's lifestyle. And actually, I was thinking about my sunburn, because how can I not? It burns and is terrible and will become scaly. I was thinking about it, and it is a good metaphor for a lot of things in addiction, but I also thought about it as like, okay, David, why do you not put on sunscreen when you need to? Why? Your skin is always super white and burnable. You just burn, peel, repeat. There's no tan coming, and yet I just keep doing this to myself. I have some scars from how bad I've been sunburned. And it's like, okay, so what am I thinking here? Why do I keep doing this? First thing is, I don't buy sunscreen with me, and I don't keep it on me like at all times. I keep a fishing pole, I keep basketball, I keep cleats, I keep all this stuff in my trunk just in case, and I don't keep sunscreen. And I don't know why. I just won't get myself to do it, or I'm in some sort of sun denial. But I also sometimes I know I won't wear sunscreen because I think to myself, well, I won't be out that long, and I hate when it gets in my eyes. I get all teary-eyed, which is a real thing. It irritates it, and I don't like the way it smells on my skin, and it's just, yeah. And there's all these reasons I have for it. When I sweat, especially when the sweat merges with it and it gets in my eyes, or just the oiliness, I don't know, I have some weird thing about it. Which, by the way, I say weird thing about it. The sunburn is much worse feeling. But I then also think to myself, like, I won't be out that long. I'll be under shade. I'm not going to do that thing. I'm wearing a hat. Just all these things, and I do it every single time. And I think part of it is, and where it goes to, addiction and drinking and all that type of stuff, is that there's one sort of idea you have in your head where you just kind of measure your pros and cons incorrectly. So like what I just described, the sweat and the sunscreen like getting in my eye, the weird smell, or it looks really dorky if it's just like a white stain of it, or it smells weird. Like, those are the cons. The pros are not getting sunburned. And so what I need to do is do a flip of that. I need to go, okay, what are the pros and cons, and do the cons of a sunburn. It's incredibly painful. If I have a really bad one, I get zapped of energy. Just being sunburnt for hours makes you tired. It peels, and then I get all the weird, flaky skin everywhere. It's like skin dandruff all over my bed and all that type of stuff. I deal with that. The cons of what? Of putting on sunscreen, all those other things that I listed, comparing the cons. That's what I'm, going for, is that trying to, when you work with life, when you're trying to be sober, when you're in recovery and you're making decisions, trying to pick, compare the cons of certain things. So when I think about this, I think about some people that they want to go to a social situation, and I'm not talking even a big thing like a wedding or something. Like for me, I have something I go to that's like trivia night, and I was going to do that for a while when I was sober. And then when I relapsed, I was vulnerable and stuff, but I wanted to go to it. And I made a real, as I call it, cons and cons list. So I really want to go to it, but people will be drinking there. And after a while of sobriety, and plus, they have beers and stuff, and they're not alcoholic. So I I don't know. I didn't drink beer. I drank vodka in a basement. But David, will you be tempted? And it just kind of go over this list of how triggering will it be? If you're triggered, will you leave? All that type of stuff. The cons are you'll be really uncomfortable. Do you think you'll actually stay there if you are uncomfortable? The worst is that it triggers you enough to where it'll put you in a bad headspace and you might relapse. So what are the cons if I don't go? I'll be kind of pissed off. I'll be mad at myself that I'm so vulnerable. I can't even go to this thing I've gone to before and have fun. Now I'm sitting at home by myself. There's been so many times people have not gone to a thing because they were worried about it causing some sort of turmoil in their mind or being triggering. But then they stayed at home alone and ended up drinking because they felt bad and they hated what they were doing. Now, the thing to that is to not be alone if you're in that headspace. But it's truly making these, being realistic and being as rational as you can, making this sort of cons and cons list. And I have I struggled recently, and I was in a relationship where we were both in recovery, and that will be discussed in great detail on the new podcast, Shoeless in South Dakota. I know I've already promoted this. I'm sorry. I got nothing else to promote, and I rarely promote things. But seriously, check it out. It's heavily focused on addiction and mental health. Please. Anyways, so I talked about this in detail, and I thought to myself, I should have, what are the cons and cons list of this? We're both in vulnerable places. This could be really destructive. If one of us falls off, it could be nightmarish and disastrous. And, so those are the cons there. I mean, there's a lot going for there. Like, you talk about a relapse, that's a very serious thing. But then I thought about, what are the cons if I don't pursue this relationship? I'll miss out. I'll think of what could have been. I'll be pissed at myself. I'll certainly have the loneliness. And the thing is that's where I'm talking about keeping that honest idea of a cons and cons list, where you're just like, how viable are these things to me? Like, David, will you get over the loneliness? You've been able to do it before. Will you be able to make it? Like, maybe put some more time under you and her belt, and you'll meet up again. Like, is it this dire? It has to be done now. These strong feelings that you have, this thing you could do, it can wait. Like, so much of this is about patience as well too, but there's that instant gratification. And that's also like understanding what the benefits and the kind of the cost analysis is. Like, how much of this is like maybe not purely instant gratification, but just kind of an impatience. And it's just like really breaking this down. And it was one of those things where you know how these things can turn out. You've seen it over and over again, and you make this sort of special pleading for yourself that you will be different. And it goes back to the sunburn, where it's just like, what, this time around is going to be different. You're not going to spend more hours than you plan to fishing in the sun. You're not going to spend more time. You've always done it this way. You've always spent too much time in the sun. Not even in the sun, just outdoors. When you go outdoors, you spend more time than you think. And if you do that without sun, you're going to get burnt. You will get burnt. You just know yourself well enough. So, I mean, is it really to the point where the stinging of the eyes with the sunscreen, or the horrific sunburn you might have? And it's tough to do that. It really is tough. I mean, not the sunscreen thing. I'm a fucking idiot. I should know by now. But I mean, with other things in life, when you try to wager what you're missing out, what you need, things, and this is recovery is related to just everything you do in your life. So if you're talking about pursuing relationships, if you're talking about making a big change in your life, job wise, how early are you in recovery? How vulnerable do you think you are mentally? And you think I know one person that they're like, I got to change my job, and I have this offer for this other job. It works commission, so it's kind of irregular, but the person had been in sales before, and they just needed a change of pace completely. They were getting so just fed up with the toxic work environment, which I've always said, if you have a toxic work environment, that is a big fucking deal. Because unfortunately, a reality for most people is that most of your waking hour is spent with your coworkers, not your friends, family, or loved ones, with your coworkers. So if you hate everybody you work with, that's a real problem. But this person was like, I think about this sort of what's good, what's bad about it. And, some people were just like, I mean, that's a big change. As of you right now being somewhat vulnerable, are you sure you want to make that big change? And that's fair and a rational sort of argument. But his argument, and other people's as well too, and I certainly sympathize with this, was that I know that seems risky to make this big change, but what you don't understand is that staying in this is wearing me down. Staying in this job is killing me. Staying in this, it's becoming more suffocating. So I actually think that what is taking the risk is less risky, because staying here is just breaking me down. And it might break me down enough to fall. And that's there's things like that to be considered. Now, sometimes we make justifications in our mind when we just really want to do something. But like he had made that point, and it was a very compelling point. And I know I've been in that situation before too. Like the biggest thing about this type of stuff is it's two things. It's one, just talk to other people about it. There's a great Erica John quote that I say a lot, where people ask a question because they don't know the answer. People ask for advice because they do know the answer, but they don't like it. I always love that quote. But sometimes people truly ask for advice, or they just need to hear feedback in their own mind out loud, or just to say it out loud. So talk to other people about it. That's an important thing when you're considering making a move, whether it's relationship, whether it's pursuing a new hobby, anything like that. And the second thing is that truly being honest with yourself, which is something you have to cultivate. Just being like just deathly honest to yourself of like, okay, am I really wanting to do this for these reasons? Am I really wanting to do this because, like for me with the relationship thing, are you really wanting to do this because you think this will absolutely be fruitful in a life partner? Or are you doing it because you're lonely? Which it wasn't either or. That's the thing about all this stuff. It's not like everything is always gray. It'd be nice. Sometimes it'd be super nice if it's just black and white. But everything's gray. In that grayness, you can get lost. And so you just have to try to, I hate saying I have to try to break these things down honestly and talk to people more. And, things aren't that simple about the choices that you have to make in your life while you're in recovery. Except there are things that are black and white. It's for me. David, just put on the fucking sunscreen. Anyways, I hope you got something out of this video. If you are struggling, my heart goes out to you. I've been struggling myself at times. So again, I sympathize fully. If you're doing well in recovery, if you've been going on years, months, days, weeks, proud of you. Keep strong. If you're watching this because you're just genuinely interested in this type of stuff, thank you for watching. And other than that, be well.